My parents canceled my flight without telling me. So, I'd missed the court, hearing about Grandpa's estate, and they could take everything. I was standing in the middle of Terminal C, with my phone in one hand and a half-empty water bottle in the other, when my entire world turned into a single sentence on a screen. Flight canceled, not delayed, not rescheduled. Canceled. I blinked at it like the pixels might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Below the bolded text was a smaller line that felt like a slap. Canceled per customer request. Customer request. I hadn't requested anything. My boarding pass had been fine 20 minutes ago when I checked it at the coffee stand. Gate 14, seat 23A, departure at 2:15 p.m. I'd memorized it the way you memorize things that matter. This flight wasn't optional. It was the difference between showing up to my grandfather's estate hearing tomorrow morning and letting my parents walk into that courtroom alone with their lawyer and their version of events. I refreshed the app. Same message. I closed it and opened it again. Still canceled. My hands stayed steady, but my chest went tight in that specific way it does when you realize someone just moved a piece on the board and didn't tell you the game had started. I didn't run. Running makes you look guilty of something. I walked directly to the nearest airline service desk, the kind with the long counter and the agents who've seen every kind of meltdown and learned to keep their faces neutral. There was a woman ahead of me arguing about a pet carrier. I waited. I didn't tap my foot. I didn't sigh loud enough for anyone to hear. When it was my turn, I set my phone on the counter and slid my driver's license next to it. "My flight's showing as canceled," I said, voice calm. "I didn't cancel it." The agent was a man in his 50s with reading glasses on a chain and the kind of tired posture that comes from double shifts. He scanned my ID, typed something, then frowned at his screen. "It was canceled about," he squinted, 17 minutes ago. "By who?" He clicked twice more. "By phone," he said slowly. "Caller answered your security question correctly." Of course they did. My parents had set up this travel account for me 3 years ago, when I was flying back and forth for college. I'd never bothered changing the password or the security answers, because it seemed paranoid at the time. Now it seemed like the exact kind of oversight people like my mother plan around. "Can you tell me who called?" I asked. He hesitated, the way people do when policy and instinct don't line up. "We don't usually disclose." "This is interference with a court appearance," I said. Not louder, just clearer. "I need the information documented." Something in his expression shifted. Not sympathy exactly. Recognition, maybe. He scrolled further down whatever internal notes he was reading. "Caller identified himself as your father," he said, reading directly from the screen now. "Grant Melrose. He stated you were," he paused, adjusting his glasses, "not in a stable state to travel alone and requested the reservation be canceled for safety reasons." There it was. Not in a stable state. My mother had used a version of that phrase on the phone 2 days ago when she told me not to come to the hearing. "You're too emotional about this." Like, "You're not thinking clearly. Let us handle it." What she meant was, "Stay home so we can tell the judge you're unreliable." I exhaled once through my nose and kept my voice level. "I need a new ticket," I said. "Whatever's available." The agent typed, clicked, paused. "There's one seat on a flight leaving at 6:40 tonight," he said. "Gets you in at 11:55 p.m. That would get me to the hearing. Barely, if nothing else went wrong. "I'll take it," I said. He printed the new boarding pass, and then, without me asking, printed a second sheet. He slid it across the counter with 2 fingers. "Internal notes," he said quietly. "Shows the caller name, timestamp, and the reason given for cancellation." I looked down at the page. There it was in black and white. Grant Melrose, next to a phone number I recognized. Below that, the notes field, "Passenger not safe to travel alone per father. Requests cancellation." I folded the paper in half and slipped it into the inner pocket of my jacket, where it wouldn't crease. "Thank you," I said. He nodded once. "Good luck with your hearing." I walked toward security with my new boarding pass and a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with flying. The TSA line moved in its usual shuffle. I had my shoes off, my laptop out, my liquids in the clear bag. I stepped through the metal detector without incident and was reaching for my bin when a hand touched my shoulder. Not grabbed, touched. Firm but polite. "Ma'am," a voice said, "can you step over here for a moment?" I turned. A TSA officer, younger than me, with a name tag that said J. Brennan, was gesturing to the side. Behind him, another officer was already pulling my carry-on off the conveyor. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "Just a routine check," Brennan said, but his tone wasn't routine. It was scripted. I followed him to a side table where a second officer, older, female, with sharp eyes, was waiting. She didn't smile. "We're going to swab your bag," she said. "Standard procedure." I nodded. I didn't argue. Arguing at airport security is like arguing with a stop sign. They swabbed my laptop. They swabbed the inside of my bag. They swabbed my hands. The older officer watched me the entire time, like she was waiting for me to flinch. When the swabs came back clean, Brennan exchanged a look with his partner. Then he said, "We need you to come with us for a moment." "Why?" I asked. "Just a few questions," the older officer said. "It won't take long." I glanced at the clock on the wall. I still had 2 hours before boarding. Enough time, barely. "All right," I said. They led me to a small office behind the checkpoint. Glass walls, metal desk, 2 chairs bolted to the floor. The kind of room designed to feel official without being comfortable. Brennan gestured to one of the chairs. I sat. The older officer stayed standing. She pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen a few times. "Ms. Melrose," she said, reading from the screen, "you're traveling to Clarkson County today?" "Yes." "For what purpose?" "A court hearing." "What kind of hearing?" "Probate," I said. "My grandfather's estate." She nodded, typed something. "We received a report this morning," she said, not looking up. "Caller expressed concern about your travel today. Said you might be a risk." I felt my pulse slow instead of speed up, not because I was calm, because I was recognizing the pattern. "Who called?" I asked. She looked at me then. "A family member." "My father," I said. She didn't confirm it, but she didn't deny it either. "The caller stated you've been erratic recently," she said, "that you made statements about making people pay for what they did." I stared at her. "That's not true." "Did you make any statements to family members about this hearing?" she asked. "I told them I was attending," I said. "That's not a threat. That's a fact." Brennan, still standing by the door, spoke up. "The caller said you were unstable and that they were worried about public safety." Public safety. My father knew exactly what words to use. Words that get attention. Words that create records. "Officer," I said, keeping my voice steady, "my father just canceled my flight without my permission 15 minutes before I checked in. He told the airline I wasn't safe to travel. Now you're telling me he called here and said the same thing. Does that sound like concern, or does that sound like interference?" The older officer's eyes narrowed slightly. "Not suspicious of me. Suspicious of the situation." "Why would he interfere?" she asked. "Because if I miss the hearing tomorrow, the judge only hears his side," I said, "and he gets control of my grandfather's estate." Brennan and the older officer exchanged a look. It was quick, but I saw it. The look people give each other when a story starts making sense in a way they didn't expect. The older officer set the tablet down. "Do you have documentation of the flight cancellation?" she asked. I pulled the printout from my jacket and handed it to her. She read it, then handed it to Brennan. "He used my security question to cancel my seat," I said, "then called you to make sure I couldn't get on another one." Brennan looked at the page, then at me. "Ms. Melrose," he said carefully, "have you made any threats? To anyone?" "No." "Have you been in any altercations recently?" "No." "Any history of violence, weapons, anything we should know about?" "No." The older officer tapped her tablet again. "All right," she said. "We're going to run a standard check. If everything's clear, you're free to continue." I nodded. 10 minutes later, Brennan came back into the room and handed me a small printed slip. "You're clear," he said. "This is the incident number for the stop. If anyone asks, you were questioned and released. No detention, no arrest, no issues." I took the slip and read the number. Another piece of paper, another timestamp. "Thank you," I said. As I stood to leave, the older officer spoke again, quieter this time. "Ms. Melrose," she said, "if your father tries this again, reference this number. It shows we cleared you. Twice in one day starts looking like harassment." I met her eyes. She wasn't smiling, but there was something there. Not pity, respect maybe. "I will," I said. I made it to the gate with 40 minutes to spare. My hands were still steady, but my mind was moving fast, cataloging everything. Flight canceled, documented. Security stop, documented. Both traced back to my father, documented. I sat in one of the hard plastic chairs near the window and pulled out my phone. I had 3 missed calls from my mother. No voicemails, just calls. The kind you make when you want to seem worried without actually saying anything on the record. I didn't call her back. Instead, I opened my email and found the message from the probate court clerk that had come through that morning. I'd read it twice already, but I read it again now with fresh eyes. Notice: hearing time change. Estate of Harold Melrose now scheduled for 8 a.m., 2 hours earlier than the original time. The email was time-stamped 9:47 a.m., 20 minutes after my flight was canceled. I opened a new email and typed the clerk's address from memory. Subject: Request for documentation. Estate of Harold Melrose, Miss Nguyen. I am a named beneficiary in the above estate. I received notice this morning that the hearing time was moved earlier. Can you confirm who requested this change and whether any motions were filed today? I am currently in transit due to interference and need to understand what's being presented to the court in my absence. Thank you, Mara Melrose. I hit send and leaned back in the chair. Around me, people were boarding flights, buying snacks, staring at phones. Normal travel chaos. Nobody looked at me twice. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Where are you?" I didn't respond. Another buzz. "We need to talk. Call me." I turned the phone face down on my lap. 15 minutes later, my email chimed. The clerk had responded. Ms. Melrose. The time change was requested this morning by counsel for Grant and Linda Melrose, citing scheduling conflicts. A motion to proceed without you was also filed at 10:03 a.m., stating you are unable to attend due to personal circumstances, and that delay would cause undue hardship to the estate. If you have documentation contradicting the motion, you may submit it to the court's secure filing system. I cannot provide legal advice, but I can confirm the judge reviews all submitted exhibits before the hearing. Below is the filing portal link. I read the message 3 times. Motion to proceed without you. Personal circumstances. They weren't just keeping me away. They were explaining my absence before I even knew I'd be absent. I opened the link and started uploading files. First, the airline cancellation printout showing my father's name and the timestamp. Second, the TSA incident slip showing I was stopped, questioned, and cleared. Third, a screenshot of my mother's text from this morning, the one that said, "Yo, you're not stable enough for this right now." I wrote one paragraph. I deny being unable to attend due to personal circumstances. I was prevented from attending by deliberate interference. My original flight was canceled without my consent by my father, who falsely claimed I was unsafe to travel. I was subsequently stopped by TSA based on a report filed by the same person. I have rebooked travel and will arrive tonight. I request the court delay any rulings until I can appear in person. Respectfully, Mara Melrose. I attached everything and hit submit. The screen confirmed. Files received. Case number P R20248871. I exhaled and put the phone back in my pocket. Boarding started 10 minutes later. I was in Group 3. I walked down the jet bridge with my bag over one shoulder and my phone in my hand, waiting for it to buzz again. It did. Halfway to my seat. A call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, then saw the area code. Clarkson County, I answered. Ms. Melrose? A man's voice. Older, calm. Yes? This is Elliot Kavanaugh. I'm the attorney representing your grandfather's estate. I stopped walking. A woman behind me huffed and stepped around me. Mr. Kavanaugh, I said, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I wasn't expecting to file an emergency objection this afternoon, he said dryly. But here we are. I started moving again, slower. You saw the motion? I saw the motion, he said. I also saw your exhibits. The judge saw them too. My chest tightened. And? And he's not pleased, Kavanaugh said. Your parents' attorney tried to argue you were unfit to attend due to emotional distress. The judge asked if they had medical documentation. They said no. He asked if they had any documentation at all. They said they'd relied on family statements. I reached my row and slid into the window seat. What did you say? I said you'd submitted proof of interference, Kavanaugh said. Airline records, airport security records, and a timeline showing the hearing was moved the same morning your travel was sabotaged. What did the judge do? Kavanaugh paused. I heard paper rustling. He continued the hearing to tomorrow at 10 a.m. He also ordered your parents' attorney to produce any communications related to your travel and stated that if interference is proven, he'll consider sanctions. Sanctions! I closed my eyes. So I still need to be there tomorrow. You do, Kavanaugh said, but you're not walking into an empty courtroom anymore. You're walking into one where the judge already knows someone tried to keep you out. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet, he replied. Just get here. The call ended. I buckled my seatbelt and stared out the window as the plane pushed back from the gate. The sun was starting to set, turning the sky orange and pink in that unreal way it does at 30,000 feet. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. I turned the phone off completely and put it in my bag. The flight landed at 11:52 p.m. I was off the plane by midnight and in a rental car by 12:30. The highway was empty, just long stretches of darkness and the occasional truck hauling freight. I didn't go to a hotel. I drove straight to the courthouse and parked in the lot across the street. The building was dark except for a single light above the main entrance. I sat in the car with the engine off and looked at my grandfather's last voicemail on my phone. I'd saved it, even though listening to it hurt. Mara, his voice said, rough but warm. I changed the will. Your parents aren't going to like it, but it's what I want. Don't let them tell you otherwise. You hear me? Don't let them. I'd heard him. I'd heard him then, and I was hearing him now. I locked the car and walked across the street to an all-night diner I'd seen on the way in. Ordered coffee I didn't want and sat in a booth by the window where I could see the courthouse. At 7:30 a.m., I walked into the lobby. The metal detector beeped. I emptied my pockets. Keys, phone, the folded printouts. The guard waved me through. At 8 a.m., I sat in the back row of courtroom 3B and waited. At 8:15, my parents walked in with their lawyer. My mother saw me first. Her face went still, then tight. My father didn't look at me at all. At 8:30, the bailiff called the room to order. All rise. The Honorable Judge Franklin presiding. Judge Franklin was older, gray-haired, with the kind of face that doesn't give anything away. He sat, opened a file, and adjusted his glasses. Estate of Harold Melrose, he said. Case number P. R. 202-48871. He looked up. I've reviewed the motions filed yesterday, he said. I've also reviewed the exhibits submitted by Ms. Mara Melrose. My mother's lawyer stood. Your Honor, if I may. Judge Franklin held up one hand. You may not. The lawyer sat down. Judge Franklin turned a page. The court received a motion to proceed without Ms. Melrose, due citing personal circumstances and inability to attend. That motion was filed at 10:03 yesterday morning. He looked at my parents' lawyer. At 9:47 yesterday morning, he continued, the same law firm requested an emergency time change for this hearing, moving it 2 hours earlier. He paused. At 9:32 yesterday morning, Ms. Melrose's flight was canceled by her father, who told the airline she was not safe to travel. My father shifted in his seat. At 10:15 yesterday morning, Judge Franklin said, Ms. Melrose was stopped by TSA based on a report filed by the same individual. He closed the file. Counsel, he said, voice flat, would you like to explain how your clients were so certain Ms. Melrose would be unable to attend that they filed a motion about it 20 minutes after ensuring she couldn't? The lawyer opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Judge Franklin didn't wait. The motion to proceed without Ms. Melrose is denied, he said. The request for emergency time change is noted as suspicious, and I am ordering the production of all communications between your clients and this office, the airline, and any law enforcement agency regarding Ms. Melrose's travel. He looked directly at my father. Mr. Melrose, he said, if you interfere with these proceedings again, I will refer this matter to the State Bar and consider contempt charges. Do you understand? My father's jaw tightened. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Franklin turned to me. Ms. Melrose, he said, thank you for your persistence. We'll proceed with the hearing as scheduled. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. The hearing lasted 2 hours. My parents' lawyer argued that my grandfather had been confused, that he'd been unduly influenced, that the will didn't reflect his true wishes. Elliot Kavanaugh presented the will itself, notarized and witnessed, along with my grandfather's medical records showing he'd been lucid and competent. Then he presented the one thing my parents didn't know I had, a recording. My grandfather had called me 2 days after signing the will. I'd saved the voicemail, but I'd also saved something else, a video he'd sent me that same week. Just him, sitting in his kitchen, talking into his phone. This is Harold Melrose, he said on the video. Today is March 18th, 2024. I'm recording this because I know my son and daughter-in-law are going to challenge my will. They think I'm confused. I'm not. I'm leaving the house and the accounts to my granddaughter Mara because she's the only one who visited me, who called me. Who gave a damn? Grant and Linda want the money. Mara wanted her grandfather. That's the difference. He leaned closer to the camera. So if you're watching this in court, he said, it means I'm gone and they're trying to take what I gave her. Don't let them. The video ended. Judge Franklin watched it twice. Then he ruled. The will stood. The estate went to me. My parents got nothing except a court record showing what they'd tried to do. As I walked out of the courthouse, my mother grabbed my arm. You turned him against us, she hissed. I pulled my arm free. No, I said. You did that yourselves. 3 weeks later, I got a letter from the State Bar. They were investigating my father for filing a false police report and my parents' lawyer for participating in interference with a legal proceeding. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just forwarded the letter to Elliot Kavanaugh with a 2-word email. Thank you. He replied an hour later. You did the hard part. I printed every document. The airline cancellation, the TSA incident report, the court filings, the judge's ruling. I put them all in a folder labeled Estate of Harold Melrose and filed it in the cabinet in what used to be my grandfather's office. Then I sat in his chair, the one by the window, and looked out at the yard he used to tend every Saturday morning. And I thought about how close I'd come to not being here, how close they'd come to erasing me from the record entirely. How many people lose everything because they didn't keep the receipts, didn't ask the right questions, didn't know the system could be used against them until it was too late. My grandfather knew. That's why he recorded the video. That's why he told me not to let them tell me otherwise. I wasn't going to, not then, Not ever. And if someone reading this ever finds themselves in a room where people are trying to write them out of their own story, I hope they remember what I learned that day. The system doesn't care who's right. It cares who has proof. So get the proof, keep the proof, and don't let anyone convince you that asking for documentation makes you difficult. It makes you protected. And sometimes, that's the only thing standing between you and people who love you just enough to destroy you.